Every morning as dawn broke softly over the town of Maplewood, Martin Kelly would pull his school bus up to the unmarked bus stop on the edge of Sparrow Lake. It was a stop that had no sign, no shelter, just a weathered wooden bench and a patch of grass that had long since surrendered to the relentless advance of weeds. Martin had driven this route for nearly a decade, but there was something different about this particular bus stop. It wasn't just the absence of a sign, it was the presence of her. The girl appeared like clockwork, her silhouette emerging from the mist that clung to the ground. She was ethereal, with hair like spun silver, and eyes that shimmered with a depth that seemed to pull at something buried deep within him. Each day, Martin would watch her from the driver's seat, curiosity gnawing at the edges of his mind. He never knew her name, but she felt familiar, like a forgotten melody that echoed in his heart, tugging at memories he couldn't quite grasp. As the weeks turned into months, Martin noticed the subtle changes in her appearance. One day, she wore a faded blue dress that danced around her knees, while on another, she donned a tattered sweater that looked as if it had been pulled from the depths of a treasure chest. Her expressions shifted too. Sometimes she seemed lost in thought, staring into the distance, while other times a glimmer of mischief sparkled in her eyes. Each day she would wait at that unmarked stop, her presence a constant in his otherwise routine life. Martin began to question his reality. Who was she? Why did she appear so regularly? What was it about her that felt like a missing piece of his own puzzle? He found himself arriving at the bus stop earlier than usual, hoping for a glimpse of her, a fleeting moment where their worlds might intersect. But every time he drove past, he remained in his seat, the engine humming softly, his heart pounding with an inexplicable urgency. It was on a particularly grey morning, the kind that enveloped the world in a blanket of melancholy, when Martin finally made the decision to stop. He pulled the bus to a halt, the brakes squealing slightly, and watched as she turned to him, her expression unreadable. The moment stretched, filled with an electric tension, as if the universe itself held its breath. "Are you getting on?" he asked, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess himself. She approached the bus, her steps light and graceful. As she climbed the steps, Martin caught a glimpse of the photograph she clutched tightly in her hands. It was worn at the edges, the colors faded, but the image was unmistakable. Two children, laughing, their faces bright with the innocence of youth. He felt his heart lurch as he recognized himself, standing beside her, the girl from his dreams. "Who are you?" he breathed, the question heavy with all the weight of the past. "I'm Eliza," she replied, her voice soft yet resonant, "and we have a lot to talk about." As they drove away from the unmarked stop, Martin's mind raced. Eliza's presence stirred something deep within him, a whirlpool of memories that had long since settled at the bottom of his consciousness. He could almost hear the laughter of children, the sound of splashing water, and the distant echoes of joyous shouts. Sparrow Lake. The name flashed in his mind like a neon scene. It was a place he hadn't thought of in years. A summer camp that had once been the backdrop of his childhood. "Do you remember the camp?" Eliza asked, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Martin nodded slowly, the memories flooding back like a tide. He recalled the sun-drenched days spent swimming, the scent of pine trees and the laughter of friends. But there was also darkness, a shadow that loomed over those sunlit moments, whispers of experiments, strange occurrences, and children who had vanished without a trace. The camp had closed abruptly, leaving behind only fragments of a time that felt almost surreal. "They were experimenting on us," Eliza said, her voice trembling slightly. "They wanted to harness our abilities, to control us. We were just kids, Martin. We didn't understand what was happening." Martin's heart raced as he listened. Abilities? He had always felt different, as if he possessed something beyond the ordinary, but he had buried those feelings deep, convinced they were just the remnants of a wild imagination. "What do you mean?" he asked, urgency creeping into his tone. Eliza turned to him, her eyes fierce and determined. "We had powers, extraordinary ones, but they twisted them, used us for their own gain. They wanted to erase us, to make us forget. But I remember, and I need you to remember too." As they journeyed towards Sparrow Lake, Martin felt a strange pull, as if the very ground beneath them was calling him back to a time he had tried so hard to forget. The landscape shifted, trees lining the road like silent sentinels, their branches reaching out as if to grasp at the past. He could feel the weight of Eliza's presence beside him, an anchor in the turbulent sea of his memories. When they finally arrived at the camp, it stood in haunting silence, a shell of its former self. The cabins were dilapidated, the paint peeling, and the playground lay abandoned, overtaken by weeds. Yet, as they stepped out of the bus, Martin felt a surge of energy course through him. The air was thick with unspoken stories, and he could almost hear the laughter of children echoing in the distance. "Here," Eliza said, pointing toward the main lodge. "This is where it happened." They approached the old building, the door creaking ominously as they pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and decay. But in the center of the room, a large table stood, marked with the scars of time. It was here that the experiments had taken place, where dreams had been twisted into nightmares. "Do you remember?" Eliza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Martin closed his eyes, and in that moment, the memories flooded back with vivid clarity. He saw the faces of his friends, the laughter that had filled the air, and then the darkness, the fear, the confusion, the realization that they were not just children playing games, but subjects in a cruel experiment. He remembered the way they had tried to escape, the way they had vowed to never forget each other. "I remember," he finally said, his voice heavy with emotion. "But I thought it was just a dream." "It wasn't a dream," Eliza sighed, her gaze steady. "They wanted to erase us, to make us forget who we were. But we're still here, and we have to fight for the truth." As they stood in that forgotten lodge, Martin felt a surge of determination. They had been robbed of their childhood, their memories twisted into something unrecognizable. But now, standing with Eliza, he felt a sense of purpose awaken within him. They were not just victims, they were survivors, and together they would reclaim their past. They began to search the lodge, uncovering remnants of their childhood, old photographs, journals filled with scribbled notes, and drawings that depicted their powers. Each discovery ignited a spark within Martin, illuminating the shadows of his memory. The more they found, the clearer the picture became. They were not just ordinary children. They had been gifted with extraordinary abilities, telekinesis, empathy, and the power to manipulate elements. But those gifts had made them targets, and the camp had sought to exploit them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lodge, Martin and Eliza stood together, united by their shared past. They were no longer just two lost souls. They were warriors ready to confront the darkness that had haunted them for so long. "Let's expose the truth," Martin said, his voice steady. "Let's make sure no one else goes through what we did." Eliza nodded, a fierce determination shining in her eyes. "We'll find the others. We'll make them remember." As they left the lodge, the weight of their shared history hung in the air, but it was no longer a burden. It was a call to action, a reminder that they were not alone. Together, they would reclaim their identities, confront the past, and seek justice for the children who had been silenced. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but as Martin glanced at Eliza, he felt a sense of hope blossoming within him. They were bound by their memories, their powers, and their shared desire for healing. And as they stepped into the twilight, ready to face whatever lay ahead, Martin knew that together they would uncover the truth and reclaim the lives that had been stolen from them.